Hey, what is up, guys? I haven't thought of a name yet here, but there's no time for an intro in today's video. The King of Music is back with another album. This is Tuesday, so I am kinda late to the party, but I did listen to it when it came out. Lil Pump dropped the sequel to his acclaimed debut mixtape last Friday, and in today's video I'm going to review it. Now, going into this album, I'm going to admit my expectations weren't very high. I know I'm Lil Pump's biggest fan, so obviously I should have high expectations going into the album. But this album came after a 2-year break after his No Name project with Ronnie J. Now, this was a weird project. I feel like I was like the only person that actually listened to it. It was actually like it performed so badly that like they had to change the name, because originally I think it was like Lil Pump 1.5 or something, but it was awful. There were like 2 good songs, and even then one of them was just good because Tory Lanez had a good part on it. Which is funny considering I'm not even really a massive fan of the guy's music, but yeah. So my expectations were kinda low going into this, and then the track list was revealed, and I was sort of like, ugh. Now let's get into the review. Now, this first track, Tesla, really actually caught me off guard, if I'm being honest. Like, this was a really great track in my opinion. You've got sort of like a Chief Keef type beat, if you know what I mean. And you've got Lil Pump and Smoke Perp trading bars over this, and it goes really hard. It's really upbeat, energetic song, and there's also sort of back to that old Lil Pump energy that made his music popular. It's a really interesting, surprising track. Now, despite how much I liked Tesla, this track really didn't do it for me. You've got Lil Pump sort of going for more of a rage style, which, cool, he's experimenting, but I'm not a massive fan of rage music. This was a lane I did see him and Smoke Perp going down at some point. Obviously, their music's not been doing the best at the moment, and rage is really popular, so it would make sense for them to go into that sort of lane. But this track just really didn't do it for me. Where to start with this one? Um, you've got Lil Pump doing a house track for some reason. Now, when I first heard this, I was like I thought the instrumental was cool, kind of. Um, if I were to describe it, if you've ever heard like the song Ego Death off the last High Dollar Sign album, it's sort of like that instrumental. But over this, you've got Lil Pump bringing this really unenthusiastic performance, and it just does not go down well. Probably one of the worst tracks on the album. Now, this song all of a sudden sort of brings the quality back up from the first few tracks, because obviously it's been quite a rocky start. Now, this one isn't an amazing song by any means, and it sort of reminds me of Off-White from the Harvard Dropout, which one of the worst songs on that album. but this song sort of does that, but does it a lot better. It's more fun energy from Pump, like he's not trying too hard over it, but it's just a fun little track. This was a track I was quite apprehensive about going into the album, when the track list was revealed. I'm not a massive fan of NBA Youngboy. I'm probably going to do a video on him at some point because I think I've got a lot of sort of interesting opinions, so I'll keep this one brief. But this track also caught me off guard, and when I heard the intro I was like, this is going to be laughably bad. But you've actually got like a really like smooth R&B type song from Lil Pump and NBA Youngboy, of all people. It's actually one of the only hooks from the album that's like stuck in my head. Like this song and Tesla have really sort of been like earworms for me, and they're like two of my most replayed songs. Unfortunately, this little high we were on with All of a Sudden and I Don't Mind comes crashing and burning with another one of the worst songs on the album. Now, I'm going to admit that I am not the biggest fan of the sort of whole offbeat rapping Detroit style. In this track is Lil Pump doing that, but for like 4.5 minutes. Like, the rest of this track list keeps the songs quite short. Most of the songs are sort of between like 2 minutes and like 3 minutes, roughly. I mean, you've got like shorter songs than that, but I think this might be the only song that's longer than 3 minutes, and this was going to be a painful song no matter what, but the length really doesn't help, and you've got this sort of really low energy performance from Pump, which makes the track even more dull. And now, I'm not going to lie, I'm going to spoil it for later on. Throughout most of this album, even on the tracks I didn't like, I had fun, because it was sort of like, this is like laughably bad. But with this song, it was just, it drained all the energy out of me, and is probably my least favourite on the album, even though it's not the worst. Speaking of the worst, we've got Pump Rock X Heavy Metal. Now, this track I was interested about going into the album. It was an unreleased song that I'd seen a lot of Lil Pump fans hyping up, and also with the X in the middle and the two different titles, I assumed there was going to be a beat switch, which is kind of different for Lil Pump. But I was actually thinking about doing an album reaction to this album when it first came out, because I was available to do it, but I decided against it. But I wish I'd got my reaction to this on camera. And you start off with this sort of like punk styled song with Lil Pump screaming like the same 4 bars over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and it's awful. And then you get a beat switch into a song that's actually kind of decent at points. With heavy metal, it's more sort of that trap metal style that you'd hear on like a Zilla Kame or a Scarlord song, for example. And this fits Lil Pump a bit better, but it's still not a great track. There are moments where his flow is really quite fast-paced and catchy, but these do not last. And yeah, just an awful song, to be honest. This track, Till I See You, is the second Smokepurpp collaboration on this album, and this one fails to capture the energy and fun of Tesla, and this song just fails to really do anything for me. Again, it's really short, but it just more has an effect that makes the track kind of feel pointless, rather than having the track feel like a short but fun song. It's more just, it feels unfinished in a way, and then you've got that awful hook of Lil Pump just holding this awful melody for way longer than it should be staying, and it just doesn't work for me. Now, this track is the only single I listened to going into the album, and I mentioned Ty Dolla $ign earlier. He doesn't really do anything for me on this song. That's one thing I've been noticing with Ty Dolla $ign recently, is I don't know if you guys have noticed it, but sort of since like his feature on that French Montana album in 2021, his feature runs went from like pretty much no misses and like really consistent to really consistently like weak, and it's not really working. Like, Ty Dolla $ign used to be an artist that I get really excited for to see on a track list, and because he was always bringing great performances, you know how to make a really catchy hook, and he had great vocals at points on various songs. My mind flashes back to songs of Yay and Kids See Ghosts, where he really brought these great singing performances, but recently it's not really working. And Lil Pump, despite this vibe working on I Don't Mind, this track, I don't know what it is, but he doesn't really do anything either, and it's just overall quite a bad song. With Don't Like Me, you've sort of got more of a Gunna and Lil Baby and melodic Da Baby type beat, and there are points where Lil Pump flows really well over this beat, and it's like really chill, nice vibe. But then there's also points where for some reason he decides to go way off beat for no reason, and that doesn't really work for me. Just a meh song. Not as bad as the ones that preceded it, but not by any means a track I revisit at all. Fendi on Fendi kind of sounds like a no-name throwaway, with its like sort of stereotypical hard-hitting trap beat, but really low energy performance from Pump. And I actually had to like go back and re-listen to that song before making this video, because I genuinely couldn't remember how it sounded, and it's not really changed my mind on that on the second listen. I can point at this track list and tell you how each song sounds, but this one was just really forgettable to me. Now, this track is the complete opposite of that, in probably the most energetic song on the album, other than like pump rock X heavy metal, but that's not the kind of energy that I want to be listening to. Sort of back to that very old Lil Pump style, with this sort of ugly bass line and that being the main melody, and then distorted bass and hard hitting trap drums, and you've got a really energetic hook that is also kind of stuck in my head a bit. I think this is another one of my most replayed songs on the album, and is actually quite a decent song. Not really any complaints about it. Now, this track Move It, I've got the same sort of issues with it as Fendi on Fendi. but to a lesser extent, I think the beat on here is better. Um, it's a decent song. There's not really much to say about it. It's just a song that, like, I'll listen to it, but it's not my favourite song by any means. Not even on this album. And it's just sort of, it's sitting in like an okay to good range. Like I'd put it around like a 6 out of 10. This track keeps that same sort of vibe as Move It, but he comes with this sort of Playboy Carti style baby voice delivery, which really doesn't work for me at all. Um, just not good sounding song. This track sort of sits somewhere between the sound on like these last few songs, but also sort of mixed with the sort of energy that was on All of a Sudden. And this one's fine. Um, Quite a low energy performance, but it's not as like meh as the last few tracks. It's alright. That's about it. And it's very repetitive, which calls back to his older music, but yeah. Not repetitive in the same sort of catchy way as like a multi-millionaire or Racks on Racks, for example, or Gucci Gang or whatever, where the repetition really stuck. Now, I'm unfamiliar with G4 Boys. I hadn't actually heard of them going into this album, but their performances on this track are just kind of there. Like, it's very weak and low energy for me. Then you've got Lil Pump, who actually brings quite a fun performance to the track, but it's not really savable due to the beat, which just sounds, to be quite frank, it sounds amateur and horrible. Like, the main melody sounds like a default synth bass pattern you'd find on like FL Studio Mobile, which, yeah, it's not great. Now, my final thoughts on this album are kind of a mixed bag. On one hand, you've got great tracks like Tesla and I Don't Mind and Mosh Pit, which have really stuck with me. More sort of fun tracks like All of a Sudden as well, and yeah. But when it comes to this album, like there's like half of it that I don't like. And while on some tracks like Ain't With That and Pump Rock X Heavy Metal, he is really sort of experimenting with his sound, which I do think is something he needed to do to sort of get away from trying to recapture that SoundCloud sound. He really didn't land on a lot of these tracks with the experimentation. Um, a lot of the best tracks sound like something that he would have made years ago, and that's just a thing that I think it is far better than No Name. Like, that project genuinely like shaved years off my life, I'm convinced. But this one is just a mixed bag, and it's too much of a mixed bag for me to rate it highly. Um, I did say I don't like giving out ratings, like number ratings in my videos, but to sort of say where it compares with Lovesick, like, I'd give this album like a 4, which I think I gave that album an 8, I'd bump that up to a 9, I love that album. It's really stuck in my rotation, but this, I could see myself playing Tesla throughout the rest of the year, and some of the other tracks I mentioned liking, you know, Move It or whatever, or Splurging, but not really a great album. I had fun listening to it, and I certainly wasn't really bored throughout the track list, but it does have quite an awful middle point where you just gotta stretch like 6 bad songs in a row, and that really sort of killed the momentum of the album from the first 4 tracks, because even though I'm not a fan of Pull Up or Ain't With That, they both are different sounds for him, and then Tesla and All of a Sudden are both really fun, and then I Don't Mind, really quite a decent track. I'm kind of interested to see where Lil Pump goes after this album, because when No Name came out, I saw no one speaking about that, barely anyone knew that it actually released, whereas with this album a lot more people were speaking about it. Obviously the main thing I've seen being spoken about is how awful punk rock X heavy metal is, and I've not really seen discussion about other tracks other than maybe Tesla, so I'm not sure if this album will be able to revive his career, but I think he is on the up, and to be honest, I think while his clout chasing antics and stuff was at some points ludicrous, I think people like Lil Pump, and that it would be fun to see him come back, if you know what I mean. But that's just my opinion. If you've watched this video all the way through, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you again with another one.